The truth will set you free. But what does that mean? Hi, and welcome to Simply Christ. I'm Mark Shepard. Glad you are here with us. Make sure you subscribe, leave a comment, hit the like button. You know all of that thing. This is the first time in a long time that we have put together a video, a teaching video. We've put together some audiobooks, and we're going to talk about those. However, if you want to jump right into today's lesson, just go ahead and look at the chapters and go to the chapter marking and pick up from there. Before that, let's talk a little bit about some of the audiobooks. We just put together one by A.J. Apasame about the life of Sundar Singh, a very interesting book, very easy listen. It doesn't take long, maybe 2.5 hours, maybe 3 hours at the most. It was written in the 1920s, and some of the teachings of Sundar Singh that are in there, very easy to understand. Again, I've mispronounced some of the names and some of the villages, so please bear with me. We are working on another one called The Gospel According, or The Gospel of Sundar Singh. Don't let that name fool you. It is not talking or trying to say that Sundar Singh has another gospel. It just simply means that this is how he sees the gospel of Christ. It's his view of what Jesus is really trying to teach. This one is a lot more difficult to narrate. One of the reasons being is it has a lot of words that are in Latin and a lot of words in Indian as well, maybe Telugu or whichever language exactly it is. But then it also has some words in Greek. Now, I don't even know how to pronounce anything in Greek. So I've put together the first chapter. I've had to read it 3 times. It's very difficult, and there's a lot of chapters. It's a long process, but I am getting to it. So stay tuned for those, and we'll try to get those as soon as we can. Let's get right now to the lesson on spiritual truth. What is spiritual truth? And when it talks about Jesus talking about living in the Spirit, what does he really mean about being free and knowing what the truth is? Many people spend their life in frustration, in confusion, and even some in depression, looking for truth. Unfortunately, there are many Christians who find themselves in that because they're looking for truth, and they're looking for it in such a way that they drive themselves into a state, many times, of panic and despair because they have this idea of what they should be as Christians. Today, we're going to be looking about what that truth is and how it sets you free, and the way we should be looking at it so we can get away from any type of despair, confusion, frustration, or even depression you may be facing in your spiritual walk. And we're going to talk about some very important elements that people build upon that maybe, well, not maybe, but are really hurting their spiritual development. And they're not receiving that joy that they should be having simply because they're building it on the wrong type of foundation. Let's look now at John chapter 8, verses 29 through 32. In the Aramaic scriptures, "And the one who has sent me is with me, and my Father does not leave me alone, because those things which I do is that which always pleases him." And while he was speaking these things, many believed in him, and Yeshua said unto those Jews who had believed in him, "If you should remain in my word, you are truly my disciples, and you will know the truth, and he, the Shrara, the truth, will set you free." I left that last word in here, that last word in Aramaic, on purpose, and I want to get to it for just a second. But let's look at a couple of things that Jesus says here before we start getting into the Spirit and the spiritual life and so forth. I think there's some groundwork we need to lay. Just for a few moments, it won't take long, but I think it's very important. Let's look at this verse here where he says, "And the one who has sent me is with me, and my Father doesn't leave me alone, because those things which I do is that which always pleases him." Jesus is trying to show us what the will of God is, and that is always pleasing the Father, looking for ways of pleasing him. And the question is, how do we please him, right? Again, that's back into the spiritual living, which we're going to look at and we're going to see, and we'll answer some of that question. The second verse that we're going to look at here that I want to use as just kind of an example to set the stage. And while he was speaking these things, many believed in him, and Yeshua said unto those Judean Jews who had believed in him, if you should remain in my word, you are truly my disciples. Number 2, understand that being a disciple and remaining in Jesus' words does not mean that you don't mess up, okay? It doesn't mean that if you make a mistake, you are no longer a disciple of Jesus. Many Christians have this logical fallacy because they don't understand that, or they try to use this type of logic into deciphering or understanding this. And that is that, well, if I make a mistake, God, I'm no longer a disciple. And if I'm no longer a disciple, then I'm spending my eternity in hell. That is not what Jesus is saying. Jesus is talking about people who put their hand to the plow and they turn back and they look and they say, I'm not really interested in this. And they give up and they move on. That's what Jesus is talking about. Jesus is not talking about people who fall and make mistakes. That's not what the Christian gospel is, okay? People are going to do that based upon our maturity and our maturity level. It doesn't mean that we can live in those kind of things, but it means that we should grow. God is always looking for the person who wants to get back up and move on. It's about forgiveness. Remember that. Remember, Peter asked Jesus, how many times should you forgive? What did Jesus say? 70 times 7. I mean, just keep forgiving. Just keep forgiving the person who truly is repentant and wanting to grow. That isn't important. The third one quickly to look at, and you shall know the truth, and he, the Shrara, the truth, will set you free. I use that, and I want to keep that in here because I want us to understand that truth is not some ideal that's out there floating. It's not some type of belief that's floating out in the universe somewhere, or that is not, that's impersonal. It's just something that we kind of hold as an ideal. It's not. It's a being, the spirit of truth, the spirit, the truth being a being, lives in us, changes us. And we can know that truth because that spirit, that being, that Shrara, as it says here, is going to set us free because that being is working within us to change us. As Paul says in Romans, his spirit identifies with our spirit that we are children of God. We grow. It's walk by the Spirit, and you will not satisfy the desires of the sinful nature. We live in the Spirit. The Spirit lives in us. Not this ideal that lives in us. This being lives in us. We are spiritual beings. If you and I are a spirit, and we are a being, we're not an ideal, are we? We're not an idea or just a thought. We are an actual being. The same being, the same spirit lives within us. It's not an idea that comes into our spirit. We come up with something. It's this spirit lives within us. That's an amazing thing that we could talk about forever and ever and ever. But that is the framework. So let's talk about spiritual living and this freedom that we can have. And this freedom from what? And again, these are things we could talk about forever and ever and ever on many lessons, and we should, and we will. However, I want to give you at least three things to work on or to look at and to examine and to put into our lives. And these are things that I try to put into my life. I don't always deal with or do it in the way that I should. Before we get into those three things, let's define what spiritual living is. Spiritual living is living in an unseen world that develops love, joy, peace, endurance, perseverance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, humility, patience, and self-control. Those are some of the things. I'm sure there are other elements as well. We can read some of the things we read about in Galatians. Those are some of the spiritual elements, and I'm sure it's not a non-inclusive. It includes other things as well. It doesn't exclude others, but those are some of the most important ones. That realm is what defines what spiritual living is. So if we want to understand the spiritual life, what does it look like? What is this spiritual freedom that we can know? What is this truth? What is this spiritual truth? And that is what I want to talk about today. Spiritual truth. Well, number one, spiritual truth defines reality. Our idea of reality is based usually in the five senses, what we can see, what we can touch, we can smell, we can feel, we can hear. And we tend to look at it in that way. But yet those things are always changing. Those are facts, but they're not necessarily truth, because truth is of a different realm. Joy, peace, patience, those are not physical attributes, are they? They're spiritual attributes. The peace that we should have, those are spiritual truths. The reality that we need to be looking at is a spiritual reality, because our idea of reality is not real. It's fleeting. It's changing. Even our view of politics. Now, right now we live in a world, especially here in the United States and in the West, we live in a world of decadence, and it's falling at an exponential rate. Things that 5 years ago we thought would be no way would the world ever accept that or society accept that, not only are they accepting it, they're celebrating it and expecting you to celebrate it too. It's a decadent world. It's a sick world. But we should expect that. And many people are living in an unreal world. And I mean that in the sense of Christianity. There are many Christians that are frustrated and they see this, and I understand the frustration. I totally do, because it angers and frustrates me too when I read and see the things that people are saying are normal, are good, and some that are even saying it's from God. And we look at that and we go, that's crazy. How can you say something like this is good when it does so much harm? And we become frustrated, and then what happens is our attention goes toward this. The danger is that we are now leaving the world of reality and living and trying to fight this world over here that's a changing world. Doesn't mean that we shouldn't take stand on things. I'm not saying that. But if our minds, our lives are so frustrated and angry because of the things we see around us, we have left the real world where truth, love, joy, peace are. And we're now living in this world. Jesus lived in a world under the Roman Empire, a very harsh, it was really just about a form of slavery where the Jews were kept in a very difficult position. That's why you had the zealots. And they, look at the world that Jesus lived in. But yet Jesus still had love, joy, peace, patience, because they're spiritual fruits. So how can they have those things when the world is falling around them? How can Jesus and the people in his time be living this life of peace and joy when they know that there's the things that they see are just pure evil, and they're watching their family members being killed and arrested? And the same question we can ask today. Why? Because they didn't live in this world. They lived in that world, the same world that you and I ought to live in, the world where the Spirit lives. The Christian life is about transformation. Transformation not about just being good, but transformation of the Spirit that takes us from this world unto this world. Many Christians are fighting this world of immorality. And it's true, there are things that are moral and things that are immoral. But they think the fight is a moral fight. The fight is not a moral fight. The fight is a spiritual fight. We live by the Spirit. We will produce fruit in keeping of repentance or fruit of morality. In other words, we should maybe stop trying to be moral and maybe try to start being spiritual. And when we're spiritual, the morality comes along with it. That's part of the baggage that comes with being a spiritual person. We're fighting, I think, the wrong battle. So understanding where reality is. Reality is not a political stance. Reality is not fighting political battles. Reality is eternal things. They are eternal things. It's where reality exists, because this world and everything we have in it is all going to disappear one day, maybe even sooner than we think. It's all going to be gone. What's going to be left? The spiritual realm. That's what's going to be left. So therefore, and that will last forever. So therefore, that is reality. Reality is what will last forever. After everything's been shaken out, what's left over? That's what's real. That's what's left over, because everything else is gone. So understand that the spiritual realm is where reality is. And if we understand that, and understand that important idea, then we can start to Loosen up and let go some of that frustration. Let go some of that maybe confusion that we have and start focusing on the real things. And then we get a little bit more joy and peace in our life because we're no longer over here fighting battles and trying to win and fight battles that really we're not called to fight and put all our effort into. So understand that that is where reality exists. Number 2, spiritual truth guides into more and even deeper truths. I read an article that said that 94% of all galaxies are permanently out of reach for us humans. Think about that. 94% of all the galaxies that have been explored in outer space are permanently, not just out of reach for a long time, but permanently. We'll never reach them because they're too far away. They're too grand. They're too big. They're too distant. We'll never get them. All we'll probably ever do is see them in a telescope, and that's about it. Because to reach those would just take too long of a time. The bottom line, it's too vast. It's too big. There's too much out there to explore, and it's too big. Now, take that into the spiritual realm and look at the analogy in that. It's the same, isn't it? The vast majority of spiritual truth we're not going to reach in this lifetime. Remember, Jesus says the Spirit will guide you into all truth. You will know truth, and truth will set you free. You will know the truth. We will know the truth. We're not going to know it all in this lifetime, though. Even the most holiest person that's ever lived, aside from Jesus, is not or has not reached the fullest and deepest level of spiritual truth. They haven't reached it. Oh, they've reached, long, far distances, but nothing compared to what we really ought to be reaching or where we want to reach. The point that God is making, I think, when he shows us the universe is my reality is so big, so expansive. There's so much out there that's unexplored. You won't reach it in this lifetime. It's going to take eternity to reach it, eternity to explore it, to see it. It doesn't mean that we're going to be spending all of eternity in groanfulness and moanfulness and going, oh my goodness, I need to read. No, that's not what he's saying. He's saying there's so much to explore in the spiritual realm and these truths and so many wonderful things out there that you can't even, there is no limit to them. You can continue to grow. You can continue to grow for an eternity. Isn't that amazing? Could you imagine being able to spend a million years just exploring the vast reaches of space? Imagine doing that forever in the eternal realm, exploring the vast riches of God's eternal realm, his truths. That is amazing to me. So understand that those things, there's even deeper truths out there that we don't know, but that's okay. God is going to give us those things. We're going to eventually know those things. That's going to take us deeper and deeper and deeper, which means as soon as you find out one thing, there's something else to be discovered. So don't go in life thinking you have to know everything. You don't have to know everything. As Christians, we judge ourselves so harshly. We say, I don't know everything. I've got to know everything. So I need to study more because I don't know everything. I'm going to be in trouble. That is not how God operates. God is wanting us to operate with what he has given us, which leads me to point number 3. Spiritual truth gives us peace and not confusion. The fruit of the Spirit, at least one of them, is peace, is it not? We're supposed to have peace. When we don't have peace, one of the reasons we don't have peace is because we're trying to discover things or discover answers to questions that we're really not ready to know just yet. But yet we think we have to know it. And if we ask it and we don't get an answer, it throws us into a tizzy. We've got to know it right then and there. And if we don't know it right then and there, then God's going to be mad because he wants us to know all truth. And if we don't know all truth, then we're in trouble. We're not really keeping in step with what the spiritual life is. That's not what God is saying here. What God wants us to do is be at peace with what he's given us. There are many questions that we just don't know the answers to, and we're not going to know it. Somebody else might have the answer given to them, but it's not been given to you, or it's not been given to me just yet. I read some of these writings from the what they call the desert fathers, the people who lived in maybe the second century, third century, who lived out in the desert and were seeking truths. And I read these and I go, my goodness, this is deep. I wish I knew more about it. And it's easy to become a little despondent and to say, wow, I wish I knew these things, but I don't know those things. So God must not really be happy with me for not knowing those. That is not how God operates. Look at a child. Look at a father and a child. Does a father expect certain things from an infant that he doesn't expect from an adolescent, or vice versa? Surely he expects a different level from someone who's a mature Christian than a person who's just an infant in Christ. Grow. Let God grow you. Now, we want to grow. We just can't sit back as a babe and say, I'm just not going to take it. That's not a person who's diligently seeking God. What we want to be are individuals who's diligently seeking Him. But if it's not given to us, let's move on to what we do know, which means, another point in this, is that let's operate at the level that God has given us. We're so busy, our minds are so set on trying to reach this level that we're really not ready to reach just yet. And we see that even in our institutions. I used to work for a place, and I'd see people who had come to work, they'd just graduated out of college, and they wanted to run the organization. Like, time out. You're not ready to run the organization yet. You don't have the experience. You don't have the knowledge. You don't have the know-how to do it. You're not ready to do that, but yet they wanted to. And then some are actually promoted into those positions, and we see the havoc that's left behind in their wake. And it's not a pretty picture. It's the same thing in our spiritual lives. Just operate at the level and let God take us to the next. Because if we don't, we're going to get discouraged. A level 1 player is not any less important than a level 10 player, okay? Using a gaming example. A person who's at a level 1 is not any less important than a person who's been doing it a long time. God doesn't look at that person who's been doing it a long time and say, oh, wow, I really like old so-and-so. They've been doing it a long time. But this person here, they're new to the game. I don't know much about them. I'm just going to have to wait and see. I don't have much trust. That's not how God operates. God is excited when a person comes back to God. It's a person who says, I want to come to my Father. I want to be a follower of His. You're a babe. Great. I mean, when we go to a hospital, let's look at it realistically in a real world setting for a moment. How many parents do you see when they have a child and the mother gives birth and that baby's there and they go look at that baby right after the baby's been born, they say, yeah, I don't know what that baby's going to be like. I really don't like it very much because, we're going to have to wait. I've got an older son. I like them better, but this baby, no. What do? We look at that young baby and we say, wow, what potential that baby has, that little girl has, that little boy has. We get so excited and we have this visions for them, what they can become, and we want to do everything we can to help them. They cry, we take care of them. It's the same way with God. It's the same thing. But the baby doesn't try to become a toddler the next day. No, they grow into it. They grow into the state that they're supposed to be in. That's what we want to be. We need to operate in the level of which we're operating at. Be there, operate into that. We're trying so hard to go too deep, too quickly into the things that we're not ready with. God will reveal those things when He's ready and we are ready to have them given to us. Now, we want to be diligently searching for those things, but if they haven't been given to us, it's okay. Rest at peace. Don't let the enemy tell you that you're less of a Christian or you're less of a disciple of Jesus because you don't know more or you don't know as much as what this person knows. That has nothing to do with it. Nothing at all. So understand that you want to grow in the pace which God has set you, which also means to explore and enjoy what's around you at the time. I travel to Europe quite often, and I see people who are tourists. They go into a town, and they show up at this town, And they look and they go to this museum and they run over to this museum. Then they see this site and they go to this site and they heard them get on the plane. They go back and they say, whoa, we've experienced this town. But have they really experienced it? They got off an airplane, jumped into a taxi, ran over and saw the Eiffel Tower or the Louvre, experienced a little bit of it, and then they left. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, but there's no depth in that. It's not until you really start being at a place and looking at the little things that you start seeing really what makes up that city or that place. I follow a website and it talks about the obscure places that are in the world, and there are articles written by people who find the littlest, tiniest things in a culture or in a society, and they'll write about them. And it's mind-blowing because you go, wow, I never thought of that. I never saw that. And when I go to little villages in Europe, I like to go there and just stay there and watch and experience and see what goes on, because you start picking up on the little things. The more that you're there looking to what your surroundings are and what's around you and enjoying those things instead of always looking out for what's coming next, then you're able to grow. And not only that, they help you explain what the bigger picture is going to be. Because sometimes we go look at the bigger picture and we say, well, I don't really know what this means. I got to see it, but I don't know what it meant, because we haven't spent time at the beginning to really understand the steps to get to that one. So explore and understand what God has put before you. Enjoy the level you're at. Don't be a spiritual tourist. In other words, don't go around trying to just pick up the big sights. Enjoy the little things in your spiritual walk. The more that we do that, the more God will grow us. Be patient with yourself. Patience, it's not just patience with others, but patience with ourselves. God does care for us if we're looking for Him, and He will reveal those things about Him and His spiritual world. But we have to be willing to let Him grow us at His pace. Let Him give us those things. So, what is spiritual living? Let's end it with that. Spiritual living is living in that unseen world that develops that love, that joy, that peace, all those qualities that are seen in that unseen world. And what does spiritual truth look like? What is the truth that Jesus is talking about? These three things, at least these three things. Number one, it defines reality. It's the search for what's real. Spiritual truth guides us into more and even deeper truths imaginable. But there's so much out there that if we just explore them and let God develop them in us, we will see even deeper truths, which leads again to the last one here. Spiritual truth gives us peace and not confusion. And if we want to have that peace, we've got to stop being spiritual tourists. We've got to go out and just enjoy where we're at and let God grow in us those things that He wants to grow in us at His pace. He knows us. He knows what we're capable of. He knows what we're not capable of. And He's not going to judge the heart that is truly searching for Him. Remember that. Remember who you are in Christ. You are His creation. You have been made in His image, and He's growing you into even deeper spiritual truths. So enjoy that spiritual realm. That's the promise of the Holy Spirit living in us. Isn't it great? We'll talk with you on the next video.